I'll be honest, I may underrate Stalingrad. I often am telling you guys that the Bourgogne is the best steel ship you can get, and I still believe that, but after having a Stalingrad ship request, I had a really, really good time, and I want to show you guys that. But first, we got to talk about the strengths of the Stalingrad. And really, to illustrate that, it's just the guns, right? Look at the shell velocity, look at the grouping. It's just gorgeous. And of course, dev strikes tend to follow, assuming you're catching cruisers broadside. So a really nice way to start off this game. And that really sums up Stalingrad's strengths. Do you hate battleship dispersion? Well, here's a ship that has better than battleship dispersion while retaining the ability to dev strike things. It's no light cruiser or destroyer levels of accuracy, but of course with shells this big, that's not really a reasonable thing to request. You'll notice the way I'm playing it, I'm kiting away. I am not going bow in. I've found that as I play these large Russian cruisers, I find going bow in only works in very specific situations, and I don't want to be doing that at the beginning of a game, basically ever. Only Petro gets away with it, and that's mainly because it's so stealthy. There's a lot of discussion, I guess, around the nerf coming to the Petro, in that it's being raised out of the water a little bit. To me, I don't really see that as much of a nerf. It's the concealment that I think makes Petro so tanky. It's very difficult to keep a Petro spotted consistently to shoot at, and that's the really big issue here. You notice the big gap between the 12-kilometer radar, that's the blue circle on the minimap, and my concealment, which is the white circle there close to it. It's very easy for a destroyer to sit in that range, perma-spot me, and then me to get farmed out in my Stalingrad by a bunch of long-range HE spam and battleships. A Petro really doesn't have that ability or that weakness, and that is the main differentiating factor that I think puts Petro over the top as far as being too strong. I'd love to see them nerf the concealment on Petro, but that's definitely a weakness Stalingrad has to worry about, and that's why I'm kited away. I want to be able to get out of a bad situation quickly. Notice here I am looking for cross maps. I do love to get some cross maps, as a lot of you know. And I got a little too greedy. I was definitely showing too much broadside to the Schlieffen and potentially even the Montana. But fortunately, they actually weren't shooting at me at the time, which was really, really lucky. Stalingrad, of course, is very easy to citadel. Doesn't have very much armor covering its citadel that goes above the water a long ways. It's about halfway up the broadside is where the citadel goes to. So staying angled is very, 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 very important. And at longer ranges, it's very easy to hit your shots because of the shell velocity. So it's not very hard to play the Stalingrad like this. Since the armor piercing does have improved pen angles, I really do think the armor piercing is the way to go. Even on angled targets like this, aiming up into the superstructure can definitely net some very good damage. It's not like the HE is that bad, I just really do think that armor piercing is better. That's what it comes down to. I prefer doing damage through armor piercing, and if I swap to the HE, there might be a target of opportunity who just shows up flat broadside that, well, I would have HE loaded and I'd be pretty frustrated. I'd rather just keep to the AP, but a solid mix of both is probably the ideal way to play this ship. The Schlieffen, for some reason, shoots at me, even though he was going dark, and probably could have gotten away and lived. So you notice we took a decent chunk out of him, and then I think our teammates are going to finish him off. A really solid start to this game, really. It's we got ourselves a kill on a radar cruiser, and nearly up to 75, 80,000 damage there. Turning around took a while, so I just cut that out in case you're wondering. And now we have to deal with a Montana at close range. Our team is looking to push with us, but you'll notice we lost the entire other side of the map. So we'll have to deal with that once we take this Montana out. And unfortunately, our shells go low. That's going to be something I think everyone is frustrated with, including this enemy Montana, who most of his shells went low when he shot at me. I really wish Wargaming could do something to fix that, But in our next salvo, we really showcase the pen on the Stalingrad. This ship is able to easily citadel battleships, and the improved pen angles really help that out as well. The Montana was reasonably well angled to us, and there was really no issue in us punching through into that citadel. The guns really are the bread and butter strength of the Stalingrad. Of course, having this HP pool as well as the armor, it's 50mm plating in most areas, that's very tanky when angled and can reasonably withstand some HE pressure. Unfortunately, as we all know, the cruisers don't get access to fire prevention anymore, and that's really hurt ships like Stalingrad, where this HE spam is a little bit more difficult to tank when you don't have fire prevention. It's much easier to land double fires on your ship, and then that really ticks away at the HP. But blind firing Smolensk, that is definitely something we can do. And of course, the other major strength that Stalingrad has is the radar. So getting a Smolensk within radar range pretty much means the guy is going to die. Unfortunately for most ships, the Smolensk tends to just eat overpens. Stalingrad not only has improved pen angles on this AP, but it also has a reduced fuse time. So, assuming the shells get fused and the fuses get lit, basically it has to pass through a certain amount of armor. And then a fuse is lit, and then after that time threshold is expired, then the shell will detonate, and you'll get a citadel if that shell detonates within a citadel. But if the shell passes out of the ship, which happens to be most battleships on a Smolensk, you're going to just have overpens. That's the unfortunate side. But Stalingrad has a reduced fuse time, so the time it takes for that shell to detonate after passing through the required amount of armor is very little. And that is why most of the time I'm going to tend to get citadels when I hit someone in the citadel with a Stalingrad. And that's something I've complained about with battleships quite a lot. And one of the reasons I really should be playing Stalingrad more. The consistency on these guns and the ability to get citadels is very, very, very nice. I think that I just get a little bit too frustrated with this ship not having the best armor like a battleship. It's tougher to make that last minute push in a lot of cases. In this time I make a big mistake in holding my radar. I was trying to hold it for the Napoli. I knew the Napoli could just smoke up and get away, so I wanted to hold my radar for that. But unfortunately, there's Holland made a great play and got a great torpedo salvo in on me, and that killed me in this one. So unfortunately a loss, and I'm out of that game quick. I was a little frustrated with my team, I'll be honest. But Stalingrad is still a great ship. It just can't do everything by itself. As for the build I am running Kuznetsov, as it's very easy to swap these special commanders on premium ships these days. And this is the build I'm running right now. I'm trying to spec into some AA, since Stalingrad is a very easy target to hit for armor-piercing bombs, that kind of thing. It's really, really devastating. So I'm speccing into a little bit of AA. I'm also running defensive fire to try and mitigate that. But I'm also playing in such a way where I don't have to deal with that most of the time. Concealment expert, of course. This thing is not very well concealed, so we need to do that our best with that. Superintendent is great for extra radars and healing. Adrenaline Rush is pretty much a must-have on most of these ships these days. It's just that good. And I do take Gunfeeder. This is so when I pop radar on a destroyer, I can have the option to switch to the HE very quickly. And of course, Grease the Gears is very nice on a ship that doesn't have the best turret traverse. Even with Grease the Gears, 31.3 seconds, and you're going to notice I'm actually not running reload right now, so that also improves the turret traverse, since main battery mod 3 does reduce that. If you're wondering why, it's that the game is so passive. I've actually found that in some of the games I've played, I've got very frustrated actually after those games, where I've run reload, and it's been a carrier game and a bunch of long-range HE spam and battleships, where, well, I just couldn't get in range in a Stalingrad. The concealment and armor is not quite good enough to just force the issue sometimes in those games, where you put yourself out there and suddenly 6 to 8 people are now shooting at you. Stalingrad's tanky. It's just not quite that tanky. I like using propulsion mod. I know I complained about fires and I could use damage control system mod too, but propulsion mod is so useful for this island cover play. as well as potentially open water stop-start juking. It's pretty good for that. And of course, aiming systems, we need to get a much tighter dispersion to get those dev strikes, which is a nice thing to have. Surveillance radar mod is not really required, but it is nice here since the radar doesn't last particularly long anymore. 24 seconds only. This ship used to have a much longer duration radar, but it's received some nerfs. The other nerf it's received is also onto the reload, I believe. It used to be 20 seconds base. So, a few nerfs over the years, but it's overall still a really good ship for steel. And honestly, if you're someone who's looking for a ship that is very consistent in the guns, you don't mind sacrificing some concealment and some quality of life stuff, like the horrible turning radius, or potentially this thing just being a bit of a brick. It's a very good platform. The guns are incredibly strong and a lot of fun to play with. So if you're looking for a steel ship, I still think Bourgogne's a little better, but Stalingrad is definitely a great option still. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.